Welcome to the Conclave. Hey, everybody.
Hey.
Oh, God.
I just being dick, sorry.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Conclave.Podcast. I, of course, am Patrick. With me, as always, my beautiful wife, Jess. And we are here.
He needs his eyes checked. He goes on Monday.
I do. But I also told you you're beautiful long before I needed glasses and with every prescription through, so I don't want to hear it.
I love you.
I love you. Okay. Enough of that mushy stuff. Y'all don't want to hear that anyway. So today we are going to be imploring you not just to listen or not just to hear, but to listen. Because today we're talking about decolonizing our practice. And this is something that is extremely important, especially if you're on the path of Reconstructionism when it comes to paganism.
And it's very difficult because you're going to feel called out all the time.
A lot. A lot. And even, it's not just important if you're Reconstructionist, even for neo-pagans, you know, does it necessarily line up with how you're going to be practicing in what you believe? No. But it's important to know the history. It's important to know the culture. It's important to know all these things of any deity that you're working with, even if you're doing so in a modern light. Okay. So that's what we're going to be diving into. This is something that has been extremely difficult for both of us. As a practitioner of Irish paganism, there's a lot you need to learn about the Irish culture to fully understand and grasp it. As a Norse pagan,
First off,
Jess has had to deal with so much extenuating
I gotta wait
circumstances with the Schmites
the schmazzies. Like you gotta wade through like miles upon miles of schnazzy shit to get to even the beginnings of the root.
Yeah,
And oh, that's a headache. It's a headache. And that's why, like, this whole concept is you need to approach your deities from an anthropological standpoint.
hmm
And it's not easy.
no, it's not.
But nothing worth doing is ever easy. So if you're wanting to really delve deep and find the source of your practice, your deities that you claim to work with, you got to do the work.
And who was I can't remember who I was speaking with recently, um, but the idea of using history as part of a spiritual study
Mm-hmm.
came up, and it came up with specifically speaking about Christianity
Yeah.
and how it becomes very unfortunate for them when you apply history
Yeah.
for a lot of their
Gets
modern
mired
beliefs,
into politics.
right? And I always say, for them, it's boy, that's a hard thing to try to let go of because you actually historically can sit there and say, I can trace a lineage all the way back to my God historically, and
Like
historically
the Catholic Church
the Catholic
specifically.
Church
Like
specifically.
they can go all the way back to what, Peter?
I mean, Jesus
But
as
like
a
the first pope.
yeah, yeah. Which if there's a Peter, there's obviously a Jesus, and historians all agree whether they disagree or agree with the divinity of Jesus. Historians all agree that Jesus of Nazareth was a live person, did these kind of teachings, was a rabbi, and was put to death.
Yeah.
Divinity is a whole different story. With us,
And like
at
I've
best,
been to Buddhist temple and they treat him
as
as
a
a
Buddha.
Buddha.
At best, pagans historically are told that these are fairy tales that early man created to explain away natural phenomena we didn't understand. At worst, the Abrahamic faiths have taken it all over and saying that our gods are fallen angels and demons. I being told recently that I am a demon worshipping pawn of Satan. So learning is important, but making sure that you're learning the correct things are important. Now, we'll talk about, and we have talked about, and this is the most basic version of decolonizing your practice, white sage. We're going to bring that up again because, again, this is where it cuts into, and we're doing it not to argue whether you can or can't, but what it really comes down to is you have a culture that says you can't. You have a culture that is very, very similar. I'm not going to say identical, but very, very similar that says you can. So now you look at what is perceived best and practiced most in the region that you're in and the culture that you are directly uh, conversing with. But when it comes to stuff like that, and with all of this, you have to talk to the people. You
Yes.
have to talk to those whose culture it is.
Or at least has evolved from.
Yeah,
Like, you want to talk about Irish paganism with people from Ireland, or at least given a green star by Irish practitioners, like well respected Irish practitioners, like um, Laura O'Brien, John Sullivan?
John O'Sullivan. They are the creators of the Irish Pagan School, which throw that prompt in there. I'll be talking about them later. We get
Oh,
a
yeah.
little bit more specific into how we personally have decolonized.
But then they
And
like,
Morgan Daimler as well.
yeah, but they greenlit like they had like Morgan Daimler has their stamp of approval.
Yeah, and really, they are American born. They taught themselves how to speak Irish. They taught themselves how to speak Old Irish. They are recognized, even on a historical level, as I understand worldwide, as one of the top translators of Old Irish texts.
Yeah.
So, Irish Pagan School uses them as one of their teachers. Their books are all flipping fantastic in the Pagan Portal
Yeah.
series. I've never seen a book written by anybody that is so short and has so much information in it. And they've been honorarily been deemed Irish because of
They
because of
they also have, I believe, a podcast. They're on TikTok. Like, you can find
you can
Morgan Daimler on social media
everywhere.
and
And the same with
Irish Pagan School as well.
yeah. We'll get back to them. Thank you for pointing that.
It's a great example of how you can access like old information with modern sources
Yes,
because they are very well informed. They're very well researched. Like,
yeah,
for me, they are kind of an epitome of what you're looking for in a source.
exactly. Um, and now I've lost complete train of thought of what I was
Sorry.
saying. Uh, Jumping back to okay, White Sage, right?
Oh,
And
yeah.
that whole thing, and I'm using that example because that is the best for us here in the United States. Um, when we say talk to somebody of the culture, I don't mean go talk to you know um, John Smith down the street, whose great grandpappy was 1/16th Cherokee.
Or is like, my great great grandma was a Cherokee princess. Like,
First off, that in itself has a whole lot of undertows, and a lot of people who at one point claimed to get land from cheap land from the government. We're not going to get into that because we could, but we're not going
it's
to.
also child exploitation. If
It's
you look into the history of it, like, you hear somebody's got Cherokee princess in their line. Honey, that's not what you think it means.
yeah. Um, so when we say speak to, because you know what, I am when you look at we did the ancestry DNA, right?
Hmm.
And I've always known, and yeah, more is thrown in there than I would have thought, but all of it's traced back to like Ireland, and then beyond that, but we're talking like 12th, 13th century. So, my mom's entire side of the family is Irish. Her father was family lines traced back to Northern Ireland, her mother to Ireland. 100% Irish on that side of the family. Don't come talking to me and asking me about Irish culture. I don't know it. I don't live it. I've been reading it. Don't get me wrong. And like I said, we're going to get into a little bit of what our decolonization has looked like.
Yeah.
Um, But up until that, I couldn't tell you what it was like to be Irish. No single Irish American can. No, and I'm not talking about like obviously if they grew up there and then immigrated here, that's one thing. I'm talking about those who have family lines and are, you know,
the
not the immigrant that came in here.
Irish Americans that came over, their family lines came over during the potato famine, during the Civil War, like
Yeah, and now here we are, 2025. They
what
don't know a thing about, an Irish American with that kind of lineage has no idea what it's like to actually be Irish.
we're in a country with more people of Irish descent than actually are in Ireland, but it doesn't mean they're Irish by culture.
To quote one of my favorite TV redheads, you know nothing, Jon Snow.
And
And we really don't because we don't live the culture, we don't know it. And the same thing applies when you're looking at indigenous tools here in the United States. Unless they are living it, unless they have lived it, they don't know. You don't know. And that's where it is that we need to start to study. I mean, heck, for example, and this was something and it happens with all cultures, right? It's not just, you know, the Europeans that came in and started taking things over, right? It's not just that. Because when you look at it, there's only one tribe, and I've done the research on this. And when I read it and I heard this and I realized I don't think that can't be right. But then you look into it, yeah, it is. There's only one tribe in the entire North America that can actually make dream catchers, and that's the Anishinaabe tribe.
the Anishinaabe Ojibwe.
Ojibwe in the specific, because Anishinaabe I believe is like the umbrella, and Ojibwe is kind of the
No,
song.
Ojibwe is the umbrella.
Sorry,
Anishinaabe
the
is
other way
the
around. My apologies. Um, dream catchers come from their religious practice.
and they have literally asked every North American nation,
To
please,
stop.
this is our medicine, this is our thing. Please don't sell this. Please don't make this without being trained within our people and within the medicine.
And if you
Because
go on spiritual Walmart, Etsy, you're going to find a whole lot of people from other tribes that are still making dream catchers. So the need to decolonize comes in everywhere.
and that's honestly like they're trying to make a buck, and I get it. Um, but as far as I am aware, the Anishinaabe Ojibwe people are the only ones who have the medicine that make dream catchers real.
Yeah.
Everything else is a decoration.
Yeah, it's just a circle of wood with twine going around it.
Yep.
Now, they may have found their own medicine to pray into it, but it still doesn't make it
It's not
right.
a dream catcher.
So this happens everywhere with every culture. Anytime that you are taking on the practice of a culture that is not originally yours, you run the risk of colonizing it. If you are jumping into a practice that has potentially been colonized by others, it is your responsibility getting into that practice to decolonize it, to learn what it's like to have lived there as close as you can. And then let's start leaking into our version because it's going to come across a little bit better
It,
that
it's
way.
it's also your responsibility to not feel entitled to the information.
Yes.
You are not entitled to shit in this life, period.
Nope.
Much less information that is squirrely at best. So you're not entitled to practices or information that you do not work for, period.
Yep. Even
That's
even
it.
practices that are open, a lot of times they're going to come with contingencies, right? This is an open practice, but you need to respect the original voice. You need to respect where the practice came from. You can't just make it up as you go.
Yeah.
Type of a thing. Do you want to discuss decolonizing your Norse practice first, or would you like me to talk about mine and we get into
No, we can talk about mine
the
because mine's
Shakespeareism?
pretty quick. So for those of you who don't know, I'm a Lokian, Norse pagan. I always say Lokian first because that is where my practice lies. And a lot of being a Lokian is understanding like overarching themes and cycles, including Ragnarokian tower cycles like we're in now. Um, the thing with Norse paganism is literal Nazis took over a lot of like the symbols, the runes, etc. Like, and I'm talking like 1940s Germany Nazis, not skinheads right now. They're just
Kind of funny.
continuing the tradition,
Even that tradition has been called.
right? But like they're continuing what Schmittler did. Um, there are a lot of spaces that are very, very questionable within Norse paganism. Um, so it's been a challenge, but I always say like a great litmus test for people wanting to start Norse paganism is see what then you're like looking for a Facebook group or a Discord or something like where you can talk to other people and get some information. Ask them about Loki because within the Schnazi groups, he is the literal devil. Everyone else is either like ambivalent to apathetic about him or they're like, let's talk more.
Or apparently, isn't there some divisions? I don't know if necessarily this falls into the bad or the good, but aren't there some divisions that say Loki never existed?
Yeah. Or no, they claim that Loki was never worshipped as a god,
Okay,
which
dude,
I
was just
mean,
there to stir the pot.
yeah, but that's one of his kennings is
Right.
stir stories, which I only know because I decolonized my practice and did the fucking research.
There it
Um,
is, folks. There
there it is. Hey,
it is.
and one source I found very, very helpful in this was Seeds of Yggdrasil by Maria Kvilic. Uh, they are a professor. They went to the University of Oslo in Norway, and their whole thing is approaching mythology from a anthropological standpoint. And their books are so heavily annotated and bibliographied, and they're like, here's all the sources. And then I'm going to break it down a little bit for you, but my first book is still 600 pages. Um, and I sell by the pound, and they're independently published. They also have a
I
page.
kilogram over
Oh,
there.
yeah. But they also have a Patreon that you can sign up for. It's like $11 a month. And they do all sorts of lectures and videos and stuff. It's very, very helpful for having kind of a safe space to delve into things. And it was through my research with their books that I went from working with just Loki to working with Edu. Uh, so I have found them eminently helpful as a source, and I did always appreciate the fact that they were like when I was earlier in my practice, I was hanging out in mostly Lokian spaces. Uh, and there was always a lot of disdain for Snorri Sturluson, which is where we have most of the prose edda from. And oh, they were like, oh, he's just a Christian. He's just colonizing the practice, basically. And I get what they're saying. And then I was reading Maria's books, and she was like, so Snorri gets a lot of heat for just being another Christian who is, you know, bullshitting his way through mythology. His intent wasn't to give us the Norse mythology. His intent, as he was looking around himself, he saw the younger generation losing the ability to write skaldic poetry.
Mm.
So he wrote a manual on how to write skaldic poetry and reminding them of the kennings and the Haiti and reminding them of how to write their art form, their cultural art form. So he wasn't colonizing the practice. Yeah, he changed some shit around because he wanted to make sure that the art form was preserved, not necessarily the
So he
history.
was trying to preserve one form of the culture,
Yeah,
and in turn accidentally colonize another form of the culture while also preserving it.
because he needed to make sure that whatever he wrote wasn't going to immediately get burned by Christians.
That's fair.
So he made it acceptable to them by changing it to match the modern mythology of the time. But his intent was to preserve the art form. So it would be the same way as somebody who is a Greek sculpturist
Mhm.
who was known for his sculptures of the gods, turning around and putting angel wings on them and being like, well, that's Michael now. That's not Apollo. Like,
Which is great. It's great for them to do to preserve and keep it around. But at the same time, that's what we're kind of talking about. That's why there's a lot of research that goes into this kind of stuff. Because if you just take it at face value, you're going to think this is Michael,
yeah,
when in reality it's Apollo, and now there's more to learn.
yeah.
So one of the big things, and I know this has been a huge help for you, is the actual research, not of the book, not of the material in the book, but of the author,
hmm
and doing deep dives on that, because you need to find out, is this person a secret witchman of Hermesis?
Yeah, exactly. And you have to, one thing I always tell people when they come to the shop and they're looking for resources, I can usually lead them to good ones in certain aspects.
Hmm.
Like I know good authors for Norse paganism, I know good authors for Irish paganism. Um, but there were some times early on in my practice that I was looking for information on Norse paganism. And you go on Amazon and you're like Norse paganism, da 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 da, and then you see a bunch of books pop up and you add them to your wish list and you're like, I'll look into those later. One thing I always tell people, look, take that author that you found, type in controversies with author's name. You're going to come up with a lot of dirt or nothing. If you come up with nothing, chances are that's a decent resource. Or it's a ghostwriter. If the name sounds fake, it is. Like the information is also fake. I always say this, like, um there are some exceptions, like Silver Raven Wolf. We know that's a real person. They are very well known within the pagan community. I don't agree with their information. But we know that's a real person. But like, you get something like I've got,
Raven, Starseed, Moonbottom.
yeah, or um Kendra brought a book of,
Kendra's a friend of ours who is a Hellenic
yeah,
practitioner.
mostly with Hades.
Jesus, copyright.
But she brought me a book she brought off the TikTok shop about like herbalism and herbal practices like green witchery. I was like, oh, that sounds cool. Like, and I was flipping through it and I went to look it up to see if I could get my own copy. I looked up the book title on Amazon and there were 7 different authors.
Oh, jeez.
It's 100% AI written. Like, but you wouldn't know that if you didn't know to look.
Yeah, and at the same time, AI written, it's not going to be 100% bad.
Well, and
It's
it's
not going
not
to be 100.
7 different authors on one book. It was like the book written by author one. And then the next listing was the book, different author, book, different author, book, different author.
Same picture probably and all.
Oh yeah, same picture. They just like fucking copied and pasted a different author on the picture. Like, obviously this is not a real book. Like, sorry. The information could still be fairly valid, or at least some of it. I mean, it's a pretty big book. Some of it was probably also all done by ChatGPT, and
Yeah.
they slap a random ass name on it that sounds witchy, and then feed it to the world.
Yep.
So again, when you're looking for sources, you need to do your due diligence. And if somebody recommends a book to you, you need to ask them why they recommend that book. You need to hear them when they say, like, okay, like, this is really well sourced. It has a bibliography. I've looked into the author. Like, And if they don't know any of that, sure, still look into the book, but do your own due diligence then so
Yep.
you can determine whether or not it's something that you should be wasting your time on or not.
Fair. Very, very fair. Any other ways that you've had to go through and decolonize your practice, or is that about?
I mean, mostly I'm constantly decolonizing my practice. That's it. Just at this point, like it's a second nature thing where it's like I read something, I look at the source, I'm like, okay, is this what am I reading here? What am I doing here? Already researched the author, like and sometimes it's just like, okay, so that was a fun bit of fiction.
See, and I find it very helpful, anytime, especially with um, classes that I've done that touch into holidays, traditions that have come from that region. Mythology Monday,
Hmm.
when I do those, if any of the times that they come from the Norse practice, like 90% of the time, the first thing I do is go, Jess, this is what I'm being told, explain. And
And I usually have the
chunk of the
information off the top of my head.
and the good chunk of the time it is different from what I just read. And a lot of the time I'll back it up with, where did you see that?
It's also been a challenge as a Norse pagan not to just wade through Nazism. It's also been a challenge to wade through comic book.
Yeah, the
You know,
Marvel and all that kind of good
yeah,
stuff that goes
like
along with it.
wading through the MCU. Like, don't get me wrong. I think I'm like 90% sure that Loki at some point possessed Tom Hiddleston.
Yeah, probably.
Um,
Probably.
but that's not Norse Loki. That's MC. Like, and you get a lot of people within within Norse spaces that will conflate like Chris Hemsworth with Thor, and they get mad when God of
Heck yeah.
War game has him all like chunky with the big red beard and the braces, and I'm like, but that's
I thought Thor is more accurate
yeah, like
than WWE superstar.
yeah, like if you've ever seen Lifters, the God of War Thor is more accurate to what Thor would look like with his particular skill set and his body type. So it's like, no. So you get a lot of that too. Like is like people conflating MCU with Norse paganism. And honestly, like a lot of Norse pagans get like really offended by it. But honestly, I'm like, bitches figured out how to stay alive.
Yeah.
Like, sorry,
And
not sorry.
at the same time, there's one very specific scene in, was it Love and Thunder? The naysayers of the MCU. And
Mm-hmm.
Thor can just all shut up and enjoy it for a moment. Most of you should know
Talking
what I'm
about
talking
when he's
about.
talking to Zeus.
Oh, yeah. It's Nutritional goes, oh, I'm sorry, but hello.
Hello. Yeah. But honestly, like Love and Thunder Thor and like Big Lebowski Thor in the MCU is probably more lore accurate than
When it seems like it seems like they attempt occasionally to throw some
they always
things in
give like
there,
some kind of
like Love
nod.
and Thunder, the chariot being pulled by the screaming
That
goats,
screaming go I love the goats.
right? That's
The
accurate.
ship in Love and Thunder.
Yeah.
That is reminiscent of the ship that is sailed to Ragnarok. Like
Hmm.
they always have a little bit of a nod. Like they've done their research, but it's like, please don't conflate MCU with
Yeah, because then you get one parts that are completely off the script, like hell.
or the fact that all three of them were siblings, and it's like the amount of times I have to be like, oh yeah, Thor and Loki were brothers in this shop, and I'm like, motherfucker, no, they aren't. No, they're not. In fact, if you go through the lineage.
Isn't he like
Loki
grandfather,
is the
Odin's grandfather?
Loki is the great grandfather-in-law of Odin,
Yeah. Okay.
who fucked Ord Earth to make Thor. So he is the great great grandfather-in-law of Thor,
There we have it, folks. So
which I got from Maria Phillips
yeah,
books.
when I asked Jess to, confirm or deny what I read online. And then I ask her, okay, well, where did you get it from? If it's from Maria, it's like, yep, no, okay, we're good. It's solid.
So hold on, let me
100% solid.
pull out my book with my tabs in it and be like, right, yeah.
And that's what it really comes down to. It's that research, it's that knowing, it's finding the key players that you can take at face value,
Yeah.
right? Now,
Doesn't say don't do discernment, but most of the time, if you find those few authors
yeah,
like that, you can just be like, this person has done the research for me, and now they're my research. Um, it's a big relief when you find those authors.
yeah, yeah, and like we mentioned, uh, the Irish Pagan School is a huge one for myself,
Yeah.
where it's along those same lines. If it's coming from there, I can pretty much guarantee you 100,000% it is accurate
They've done 6 months more research than I have
on
on
just that one story.
on just this one, like this 3-page story, like that has been sourced to death.
So I will say there's a couple things being a practitioner of Irish paganism that is so much easier than being a Norse pagan. First off, I don't have to worry, for the most part, I don't have to worry about the Nazis getting involved.
Mhm.
Right? The racism isn't necessarily there. I'm sure there are some people out there who do slide it in without letting it be seen, but in the rampant form that it is, something we don't have to deal with. I was also able to find a lot of Facebook communities and online communities earlier in my practice that really opened my eyes to a lot of things. And, these were the precursors to the Irish Pagan School. Um, when I started work, working with and worshiping the Morrigan, I go on Facebook, I find a group, the Morrigan Cave, and it was run by this Irish person, Laura O'Brien, and I'm like, all right, cool. Let's see what this is all about. And the questions you have to answer to get in there were kind of fun, right? And at the end, it's like, no, but seriously. And so it's like, cool. And I get in and I start, the resources that were available on there just from the beginning were amazing. But one thing I started noticing was there was a lot of hate for Americans and a lot of people telling Americans, shut up and sit down.
And he got his
And
back up about it hard at the
yeah, and
beginning.
I was like, what the hell? Like, what, just because we're not from the same country, we don't have a right to talk and blah, blah, blah. But I kept my mouth shut and I sat down
And you
and
listen to
I
the other
listened
Americans
to the
run their
other,
mouths.
yeah, I listened to what was actually being said by those of us on this side of the pond. It's like, oh God, shut up. Like, I would find literal people who have never even thought about visiting Ireland telling people who have lived in Ireland their entire life what their lived experiences
Work.
were, and that as a indigenous Irish, they were wrong. And it's like, oh, pudding. Oh, sweetie, no, no, no. Okay, I get it now. I totally
Now I
get it.
understand why I need to sit
So,
down
and
and shut up.
I recommended that Facebook group, the Morrigan Cave, and the Irish Pagan School Facebook group when I found that one and joined that one as well. Everyone I've told about, hey, this is a great resource. It's a great community to get involved with. I also add the caveat: sit down and shut your mouth.
Yeah.
Don't 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 even attempt to overspeak the native line because you are wrong. You will get smacked down. And now that's not to say that we need to just blindly believe everything that's coming from the people of the cultures. But even if you know 100%
That
that you are right and they are wrong because they are not remembering the specific lore correctly or something of that such, there are tactful ways to go, oh, but I thought in that story this. You may trigger something and then make them go like, oh shit, you're right. Or you can at least prove like, hey, I'm not just this typical loudmouth. I do have an understanding, and then take their position into account.
and I
You don't have to believe them blindly. You don't have to agree with them blindly. But there might be a reason why they interpreted or read a story
a
a
different way
different
than you
way.
did. And anytime, I honestly think this is fair to any group you join. Spend some time watching and listening.
Yeah,
You should always be taking time to listen to the voices around you before joining the
Yes,
conversation.
100%. 100%. Now, there's other ways that I have taken into decolonizing my practice. And I have some books off to the side here just to show like the path. So one of the first books I read in this was The Magic of the Celtic Otherworlds, Irish History, Lore, and Rituals by Steve Blamiers, right? I got a lot of good information from this. I still reference this book. I don't necessarily think it's a good end all be all anymore. I don't recommend it to people as much as I used to because I've learned and grew from, right?
But if it helped you start out, sometimes
Yeah. And it, it puts you in the right direction of learning. So I still think it's a good, very beginners. This guy's from England. He's part of the culture that
he
first
was
went
one of
in
the OG
and
colonizers.
colonized this territory, right? And I'm saying that he did that. I'm not saying that this book does that. But there have been inaccuracies that I found. There are ways of explaining different deities and things
And
that aren't quite right.
you were recommended Stephanie Woodfield at the beginning
I
of your
was
practice.
recommending Stephanie Woodfield at the beginning of my practice. You know what? For again, somebody first taking steps into,
Or who wants a more neo-pagan approach.
I would still recommend. However, I put in the caveat that she is a neo-pagan. She's an American. She teaches and discusses and talks on unverifiable personal gnosis, UPG,
Mhm.
as the key to being over mythology. I don't agree with that. A lot of people don't agree with that. A lot of people do agree with that. Is it a good resource to get your toes wet? Yeah, but that better not be where you stop.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's kind of the point I'm taking with these kind of books and with authors like that is yeah, take in as much information as you can in the beginning.
And
But
look,
then start unraveling it. Because then I get stuff like this book here, Ireland's Mortals, A History of the Gods of the Irish Myth, Mark Williams, right? Okay. So I saw it. I read the synopsis on it. I was like, oh, that seems like it might be a decent book. And then I took the Irish Pagan School, yeah, Facebook page and looked to see if it was on their recommended reading list. And it is, which I'm a little surprised on because this author is, uh, he's a literature professor, if
mhm.
I'm remembering correctly, and he approaches mythology and lore as such, right? So he doesn't believe that the old gods were real. They were stories. They taught lessons, stuff like that. Now, I think this book is still fantastic for a couple reasons. One, it tests your faith. If you can read and see documented points on where this is just literature,
Or just
but still
allegory,
hold your
or
faith, that's a good thing. But it also taught me something else very important, and it's a very important step in the decolonization process. And this shows that it can be colonized even from within its own culture. Because there's a section of the book that talks about uh, 19th and late 19th and early 20th century authors and poets who really kind of helped revitalize the pagan movement and the mystical movement and all that kind of good
people
stuff,
like Yeats and
spirituality.
things like that.
Yeats is one of the prime examples. Um, and he shows how Yeats is one of the reasons why there's the belief of reincarnation into this practice because he was so big on and he had lived in India for a while. He loved the culture, loved the idea of reincarnation that he brought it and implemented it into Irish spirituality. One of his friends, I don't remember the guy's name, created a pen name, a female. And so, he didn't want to get associated with the books directly and thought this would be a better way to do it. Created a pen name and a persona of a woman author who just straight up made up new stories and new gods to fit into the narrative to make it more interesting and keep people going in there. I wouldn't know these things were part of it. I wouldn't have known if it wasn't for reading Mark Williams. You know, he goes into that and he shows you, and it taught me what time frames to go, I really need to double down and recheck this.
Yeah.
What authors, like you were saying, look it up. Is it a controversy? Let's go one step further. Look up the person's history because a
Also,
lot of them did use pen names.
notice what this book has, though, even though Pat is not a huge fan. It's a bibliography.
I'm a fan of bibliographies. What are you talking about?
You're not a huge fan of the book, but
Oh,
what
oh,
he has is
yeah,
works cited. And you know what's great? As a jumping off point, you find an author you really like and you really vibe with. Go into this section and you're gonna find a whole new section of
yep,
lore.
yep. So you learn to look deep into the history of the author because then oh shit, that's a pen name. Okay, now let's look at who was really writing it. Oh, or oh, okay. It gives you that time frame, and I tell people all the time now, if you are basing all your mythological beliefs off of things written in the late 19th, early 20th centuries,
You gotta
you need to do
take
some
a
more
real long
research.
hard look.
You want to be looking at that kind of stuff. You need to see the basis being thousands of years ago.
Like,
And I'm not saying that, I mean, thousands of years ago, nobody speaks those languages anymore. But are you reading translations from that long ago, or are you reading retold stories from that long ago?
I mean, I had somebody come into the shop the other, like, I don't know, maybe a month ago, going like, "Have you read Madame Blavatsky?" And I'm like, "I will never touch her shit." Why not? I'm like, because she's a known and proven charlatan.
Yeah.
Like, it's not even hard to find that information. You put Madame Blavatsky into a Google search, and you're gonna end up with 30 pages of how much of a fraud they were. Like, again,
So that's going to be. I hope you're starting to get note to this. That the biggest way of decolonizing your practice, two biggest ways: talking to the people and researching your authors.
yep.
Okay. Now, my my journey through the books has led me to
Mm,
this series, the Labor Gabala Aaron, the books of the taking of Ireland, the five invasions that are part of the creation story of Ireland. This is the Robert Alexander Stuart McAllister uh, selection and um, translations. Boy, this first one's really difficult to get into, and it's because this first one it's pretty much the biblical creation story. There's Adam and Eve. There's Cain and Abel and their families. There's Noah,
it's
his
Genesis.
sons, right? Now, I will say I'm learning a lot about the the parts of those stories that I never heard as a Catholic, but that's another form of understanding your colonization, right?
And what about the Irishman you met yesterday in the Denny's who saw you reading that?
That was just a really side story. So, uh, Jess forced me to
This
take
just the cool story. I'm
Jess
sorry.
forced me to take yesterday off. Um, Thankfully so.
Yeah, you needed
It's
it.
I needed some time. So I took myself out to breakfast, and I was going to go to this one restaurant here in Pittsburgh that's supposed to be really great pancakes and known for it.
Every time he tries to
Every
go,
time I
it's
try to
closed
freaking go there, it's closed, and I've never tried it. And you know what? I probably never will.
at this point.
And the only place that was close to where I was that did breakfast, I did pass one Eaton Park, but it was that real shady looking one.
Oh yeah.
And it's like, eh. And Denny's, it's okay. You're not going to get terrible food at Denny's. You're not going to get great food at Denny's. You're going to get food, right?
You're gonna get acceptable food that you are appropriately prepared for.
Yes. Um, and I'm sitting there drinking my coffee. My food hasn't even come yet. And there was a table that I was walked past when I went to sit, and it was a booth, and it was set for one person. Apparently, this gentleman got up to go use the bathroom, and the busboy was a little overzealous and bust his food, so they were having to remake him some fresh. And when it came, he turned around to show everybody, "Hey, look, I got my food." Um, and it became very, very apparent that he was from Ireland. The accent gives it away,
Yeah, right. Like
right?
it's hard not to clock that one.
But it was just very strange. That whole, "Hey, everybody, look at my food," the interaction with the wait staff. the weird look he gave me when our eyes kind of locked for half a second as he was scanning the room. It was almost like he was just finding a reason, excuse me, to turn around and try to find whatever's in that room that it's like
That's
that.
clocking him.
That's clocking him that he can read that. I'm a firm believer that most of us in this community, even if it's just a little ping, there's a ping out there, right?
Hmm.
Like recognizes like is the saying, and it goes for a lot of different things. As a veteran, it's kind of easy to tell other veterans.
Yeah.
So, it was all just very strange. And as I'm trying to read this, the Labor Gorilla Aaron, it was, I still listening into his interactions, the way he was talking, what he was doing.
He was going
It was
up and
just,
down and talking to people.
it was, it was, just, it was not right.
It's
Like,
uncanny valley. Like,
uncanny valley. It's that feeling of like they're not necessarily acting wrong, but the way they're going about everything is weirdly not right either. But you can't put your finger on
it's definitely
why.
somebody trying to pretend to be human
Yeah, and
and
I
doing it
started
almost
getting
well.
yeah,
Like,
and I started getting a massive pressure on the side of my face and head that was directly in line with him after he paid. Which again, the interaction he had with the staff doing that was just off. No real way of pointing it out, but just off. And as he walked across the restaurant to get to a young couple that was sitting at their table holding hands, finishing their meal, as he crossed in front of me, that pressure just moved along with him. It went from my right, around the right eye area to the forehead, center mass, to the left side, and it quite literally went all with him. And then he walked down the restaurant and talked to another couple at a table behind me, and then the pressure switched around and came back up and around. He came over to me and was like, "Oh, it must be a good book there, lad." And I'm like, or he commented about the author, and I was like, "Well, it's Robert Alexander's translation." And he sees the title and he just gets this knowing twinkle in his eye and he gives me one of this, that a boy. Goes back around talking to others, come back up, and he's like, well, far be it for me to put my beliefs in other people's ways, but Irish Catholics sure are getting really evangelical. And then he just walked away. So again, it was a very now, if this is an interaction with what I think it was an interaction with, they probably understand that this first story is going to be very
biblical.
Abrahamic and biblical centered. I I'm sorry, but I'm in a firm belief that I interacted with one of the sheep, one of the Fey folk
Hmm.
in this aspect because this was just honestly. And when he left the building, the pressure in my head went away. It wasn't a headache; it was just a pushing. The pressure went away, and I had to very consciously control my body from shaking. Right. At the very least, it's the same feeling you get if a predator is around. So, side story, we got a little
Yeah,
off topic
but
there,
it's so cool. And
but
it
it's
involved this book.
and it involved this book. So, here's another aspect of something that is probably very colonized, that is accepted in a decolonized fashion. Reading this as for what it is and believing this, it still inserts the Abrahamic God as the overall creator and maker and Lord of all.
Soul source, whatever.
Yeah, and it's like, I don't, that doesn't vibrate with me. At the same time, what we have to look at is for a lot of these cultures, and this is going to go back to the gentleman you were talking about with
Snorri.
the story. Um, these stories first started getting written down, if I remember correctly, in the 1300s by Christian monks because it was never written before, and they had to insert certain things and ideas into the story to make it acceptable by the church so that it didn't just get thrown away and burned. Okay. So that's another aspect of the decolonization process. If you're reading your stories, one of the first books, and I can never find it. I can never. find it. It's as if the book never existed. The first book on Irish mythology we ever bought
Yeah.
started with the story of how one of the great kings and gods of Ireland felt the death of Jesus and was so taken aback and depressed and hurt by it that he started hacking at a tree with his sword, and he did that until his heart exploded and he died.
Who was that?
I don't even remember which one they were trying to talk about. My assumption is probably Nuada,
Mm.
um, but I can't remember. Like I can't, and I've gone back looking for this book, and I can't.
Because you want to reference like
Recall
how
seeing
ridiculous
it.
that is.
It's up, but it's also, you know what? Like to a degree, I still love that book because it was the first book that introduced me
It
to
was
Unknown
taken
God.
by the fairies for being bullshit.
I, um, so we have all this to look at for the decolonization process, but then there's the process of understanding the culture in which this comes from. Now, this has taken me years to get through because it's not easy, but it is a course of Irish history. This is an actual legitimate
Like
college
college textbook.
textbook that is used in Ireland, or at least one of its editions is probably being used. And this was the fifth edition. It is, and again, so we got a whole bunch of authors and editors and stuff that go along with it. I looked each and every one of them up, and they are Irish college professors, right?
This is a
To
textbook.
This is a textbook to help me understand, and I've only gotten about it's
And
200
anybody
and some pages in, uh,
taking an American history class understands what that is.
and it's essentially what we're looking at, you know. And I haven't gotten. I think I'm in like the Elizabethan era, maybe.
Mm.
Um, but what this has done is it has given me an understanding of how long that country has been colonized.
Mm-hmm.
What, 850 roughly years? It taught me, and I didn't know this, that Dublin was originally a Viking
Yep.
settlement. I learned through there that a lot of the forms of fighting and how good the Irish got at it was learned because of how often they had to fight the Vikings, and they learned from them. And okay, let's implement this and grow it and go from there.
Oh,
There's a lot of things.
we're gonna use them back.
Yeah, there's a lot of things I've learned on it, and I still have half the book to go. The modern era side to it is going to be, I'm sure, very packed full of information. There's a lot that happened even in the last 100 or so years of Ireland's history.
I also colonized the Irish.
Oh, the North, yeah.
No, you're my bitch.
Any hootie. Um, so there's that. We're in an era where streaming and watching pop culture and TV and music and stuff like that
So easy.
from the other cultures is very easy. I haven't gotten into any of their shows. I think the Dairy Girls or something like that is a highly recommended one that shows a good example of. Now this is just what I'm hearing from um, online interactions with Irish people. Um, Music. I have Pandora channels that are folk music, that are more modern, and then even like some current Indian and punk, right? It's not indie, sorry, indie. I kind of mix those words together a little bit. Not Indian, indie.
As a side note, the show Vikings, fun to watch. Again, not accurate. It's MCU lore. All right, thank you.
But
Ragnar Lothbrok.
They do put in a lot of historical context to it.
Oh, absolutely. But just no chin lines. Makeup was different. Like,
If I remember correctly, the Blood Eagle was made up.
Blood Eagle is like, there's one account of it from a Roman that says they watched it. And if that happened, it was like the biggest of biggest sins against the culture. Like, it was one
To
of those,
allow
like,
somebody else outside to watch.
no, to actually do it. Like, if you got Blood Eagled, you fucked up. You fucked up.
Gotcha. Okay. The other thing that I'm doing to immerse myself more in the culture is Duolingo. I am 100 or 1,101 day streak going on right now. I honestly don't think I've learned much. but at the same time, it's I can at least somewhat
Makes
figure out what the names are supposed to be when I go
it makes
through
it
and read
easier
it.
to pronounce the names in your head at least.
Yeah, and there have been times where words, phrases, or TikToks have come up and people switch between English and Irish, and I'm able to follow. I would never consider myself even close to understanding a full sentence, but it helps with context clues and makes it a little bit easier
Yeah.
to figure it out. Um, and I think that's the other important thing is understanding the culture, the history of the culture, and the modern culture. It's not easy. I don't even fully understand our culture, and I've been in this country my entire damn life.
And our country's only 200 years old. Like,
Yeah. So diving into cultures that are much older and have much more going on, boy, it's tough. Listen, it is a lifelong learning process. And the decolonization side to it is a very frustrating lifelong learning process. But it is the most important thing you can do so that you are respectful to those who have been, those who are, and to the gods.
yep.
And I think I'm done with my soapbox. How about you?
I'm good. I got my last little dig on the Viking show and I'm good.
I wish we could get a show like that from the
For the
Irish,
Irish
right?
concept.
But
But
at the
then
same
they
time,
fuck
then
it
you
up
have
and
to,
you get
yeah,
all
yeah,
mad
you
about
screw it
it.
up and you have to get, convince people like, no, that's not really what it was. This is what it is.
Yeah, trust me, it's not what it's cracked up to be.
I do have one more little thing, and I think this is an important one. This is something that it took me quite some time to pick up on and to learn and to change in my own vocabulary. If you'll notice, I say I practice Irish paganism. Jess practices Norse paganism.
The practice,
Because if I just say I'm an Irish pagan, it sounds like I'm saying I am Irish.
yeah.
And that might be something small to us, but I've met a lot of people where that is something very big.
I
Because without knowing it, you are accidentally claiming the culture as yours.
uh, and I also like to say I call it a practice because it's never perfect.
Yeah,
And it's never supposed to be perfect. You should always be learning, growing, researching, trying new things, experimenting. It's a practice because it's never perfect and you will die still practicing.
yeah,
And I think that's mostly because I also come from a music background. You're always going to have to practice.
that's fair. You know, I'll leave it at this. We're gonna screw up. You're gonna screw up. You've learned it wrong. I've
You
learned it
were
wrong. Jess has
100%
learned
going
it
to
wrong.
fuck up,
We're
and
all
that's
gonna screw up.
okay.
It is perfectly okay.
Learn from your mistakes.
When you're corrected,
Don't take it as an attack when
learn.
somebody would correct you
Yep,
either. They're not calling you stupid. They're not saying you're not welcome in these spaces. They're educating you.
yep. Be thankful for it. Work through your feelings,
Sit with it for a minute.
and then adjust the way you do things. Because it only becomes a bad thing when you now know that what you're doing isn't right and you keep doing it.
Ignorance is curable, stupidity is chronic.
Don't be stupid.
Don't be stupid.
It's okay to be ignorant. Learn from it, grow, and move forward. Let people know. Correct others when you see something going wrong.
And
Great with grace. Correct with grace.
it's so easy to be like, look, dude, I made this same mistake too. Like, I fell into this trap. Here's how I learned to do better.
Yeah, 100%.
Just when you get to a certain level in your craft, it becomes a responsibility to teach others.
Correct.
Uh, Especially with what we do. That's why we have a podcast. Um, it becomes your responsibility to at least guide them in the right direction. They don't want to take the bait, they don't want to listen. That's on them.
Yep,
I can lead a horse to water, I can't make it drink.
exactly.
But I'm gonna at least try to show them where the fucking stream
Amen.
is.
And if we got any of this wrong, or if you disagree with any of this, feel free to reach out and tell us.
We got the
DM
Ask
us
Me
on,
Anything coming up.
yeah, direct message us on any of the social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, uh, comment on the podcast or the video, wherever it is that you are watching and or listening. Email us at the.conclave.podcast@gmail.com with those corrections or opposing opinions or questions. Like Jess said, our next episode is going to be that Ask a Witch that we've been talking about.
Yep.
Right? So you have limited time. Get those questions in. We'll always take questions afterwards. But this is one where you'll be able to get the answer for it from a multitude
A
of practitioners.
panel of practitioners.
We're going to have a bunch of people in here, hopefully. We've reached out to a bunch of people. Most of them have said yes. We just got to make sure we lock down.
We just got to remember when we said we were going to do it.
Yeah. So do all of that. If you enjoyed this one, like, share, subscribe, comment, all that happy crap that every single podcast or YouTuber really kind of points to.
Yep.
Smash the like button, hit the share, follow. We're going to do the same thing every single time. So you might as well just go ahead and do it.
Yep. And if you hate us, that's fine too.
Most people. And
I
not
hate me.
most.
I hate me
Aw.
sometimes, so it's fine.
Oh, yeah.
It's not a very positive.
On that positive note, you guys have yourself a great day. Until next time.